So, welcome back to the Valuation Multiplier with Rob Connell. Rob, thank you for being here again today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Nuno.
I'm Nuno Godinho, and today we're really going to look inside the enterprise and how innovation can come as a revenue engine, not just a buzzword. Rob has advised and built innovation ecosystems inside corporates and capital backed settings. So, from a ventures arm to internal spinouts to cross sector partnerships. Today, we will unpack how to make innovation work inside mature companies without getting it crushed by bureaucracy or misaligned metrics, which happen a lot.
hmm
So thank you, Rob, for being here today and for continuing sharing your great experience. And yeah, let's kick this off.
Cool. Thank you, Nuno. Yeah. Super interesting topic. Looking forward to getting into this. And for anyone who's suffered the other videos we've made together, there's going to be some consistencies here as well in terms of, well, as we get into it, in terms of setting the culture right and empowering people and all the rest of it. And I'm also probably going to, I will try to draw on personal experience, what works and what doesn't work, and why we do sometimes see failure as well around innovation. But I'll also quote a couple of things with the recent Nordic Business Forum that took place here as well, because like all of us, we're all constantly learning and challenging ourselves.
And that's a great point because constant learning is the key for any innovation to work. When we think we're on the top of the pyramid and we don't need to learn anything, that's where real trouble starts. So that culture of constant learning is key. And so let's, as you mentioned, let's start there on a segment kind of why venture building sometimes fails. So, Rob, why do so many corporate innovation efforts struggle to deliver outcomes from your perspective?
Yeah. So yeah, why do the corporate innovations struggle to deliver outcomes? And when we talk about venture building here as well, it's we need to look at where it's coming from. Is it coming top down, bottom up? People are used to that. And without so what I would draw on my own experience with this is it's encouraging people across different departments at different levels of seniority. We've talked before about, everybody having a voice. And it might be that you've created a certain level of innovation in an organization, but it still operates sometimes in silos, like is one particular R&D department or something like that that works on that. And to really make that difference, you've got to encourage people to look at the challenges that they're facing, that their customers are facing, that the suppliers are facing, or the partners are facing. So think of it in terms of colleagues in other departments and always go back to things like the customer journey. Now, sounds like a very easy thing to throw that in there, but when we look at things like a digital transformation, for example, someone might be imposing certain tools for people to use. Now, I've just used the word quite carefully there, imposing the tools. Have they actually been part of the journey to talk about what the challenges the business is facing or what the customers are maybe complaining about or what the supply chain is struggling with, etc.? And have you got that cross-functional buy-in to there is a challenge, there's a real problem, first of all, is it a genuine problem? And then when you look at the solution, who's coming up with the solution? So giving people a voice, letting people then, we talked about continuous learning a second ago. So there might be some new skills development coming in. And how have you brought the people along on this journey? So you've got the feedback from where? Is it genuine? Is it data driven, etc.? And it can be I'll draw on it with personal experience. I love the fact that I worked in one business where no matter who you were, you had to go and sit on the phones from time to time in the customer call center. That's brilliant. Same way, but I used to love getting out of the office to doing site visits and retails. You just walk around Oxford Street for the day. And it sounds like it was just an excuse to get out of the office for the day. But you learn a lot from it because you talk to the store managers, you talk to the customers, etc. And it's really important to take that time out now and again to do that. Talk to suppliers, etc. But you can also create a really safe sandbox to do this. I just noticed I'm wearing my Knoll Venture hoodie today. It's just a bit chilly today. So at Knoll Venture, we've been doing some hackathons, for example, and it's not necessarily saying you have to work on this solution today. We would talk about, here's some challenges, maybe some themes, but then let people find their own challenges as well, and identify them, but let people find their own solutions, and let people work on the things that they want to work on for that day or two. And then it doesn't matter if it fails, right? You're not taking that much time out. The other one is obviously depending on the sector that you're working in, etc. But there might be some things that are a little bit more complicated that take a little bit more time. So then embrace, a longer cycle around it. And with big structured organizations, we're often talking about, let's say, entrepreneurs, right? Who one of the lovely references I have is from an old CFO from when I worked in the telco days, who said I always like the entrepreneur within the business. And for me, I was like working in a big business. At that point, it's perfectly safe. You don't feel like a risk-taking entrepreneur, but realize that you can be the one who's not just challenging, but letting other people in your team challenge things, and not accepting the fact that things won't change and that you don't have the perfect insight of what will change, but you can do scenario planning, etc. And outside of, so how would we do that? So we'd allow people to come up with new product ideas, for example, and then you'd do focus groups, and you would go and talk to your main customers to see how they felt about that, etc. And that's great because you can get anecdotal feedback, and then you can move it on to more statistically valid feedback, etc. as well. And outside of that, the other example I would like to give is we have a research institution here in Finland, not a university, but a genuine research institution working with big corporates, and it's called VTT. And I've met a few people who have come up with a new idea within VTT, and they've not killed it off because it's not what we do or whatever it is, and they've got massive test facilities, etc. But they've basically said, yeah, let's run with that, for a while. And then if you really want to go with it, we'll help you with the technical transfer. You can take a year out. And if it doesn't work out, you can come back to your old job 12 months later. Now, you think, well, isn't that a risk for them to do that? But if you're an IP-led business, like here in Finland, if you look at Nokia, I mean, obviously the demise of Nokia on the mobile side, but Nokia still, they've just had a big investment. I think it was from NVIDIA, for example, right? So, but they've made a fortune out of their patents. Now, you're not going to make any money out of patents. You're not going to come up with any patents if you haven't created a culture of innovation.
And
So,
that's a very important part because you touched multiple elements, because one of the element is really the misalign of incentives, goals, the
oh yeah.
internal political games, and it's all that, because if it doesn't from top down believe that innovation is how you grow as a business, and as you mentioned, it's not about looking for perfection, is about improving every single day. If you improve 1% every single day, then you're in the right track. You'll be innovative. But getting people involved, because sometimes you go, and we all know about stories that, oh, that's now the innovation team. That connotation just by itself, it already generates some
Mhm,
internal politics and misalignments and everything. So in order to do that, then you mentioned that governance, that autonomy that you need to give to talent, and at the end of the day, market alignment, because you need to understand. So the research facility, how they make money, researching that
mhm,
creates more patents. Great.
mhm,
If you're a company, and I remember when I was in GE Healthcare, we had a very similar to what you mentioned, where in order to keep talent and to keep innovation, we actually, in one of our locations, we created an incubator. So if you had an idea, bring it. If it's something that is interesting, yeah, you can have those 12 months in order to go through. If it goes well, great. We have some kind of investment. We created kind of a Shark Tank approach.
Mm,
If you didn't, then you learn something very important, because every entrepreneur learns something very important.
yeah.
And that leads to a part of looking at, we already look at some of the things that don't work, but now let's look at how structure, can we structure real innovation engine. So
Hmm.
in structuring this corporate innovation and for impact on revenues on the company, what models have you seen work
Yeah.
best? Internal teams, external spinouts, or venture arms?
Yeah.
What's been your experience in their pros and cons?
Yeah, I think on that note, it's sometimes good to say to people it doesn't matter what we've got in the budget for R&D or market research or whatever. It doesn't matter what's going on in the market out there in terms of will we attract inward investment, equity investment, or can we get debt investment to do this? Um, don't I wouldn't start with that. I would start with basically empowering people to look at the challenges, think about the solutions or the creative ideas that they've got. And then from a structure point of view, just say it needs to have a standalone business case. So it doesn't matter about anything else going on in the business. It doesn't matter what the group's objectives are, etc. It can have a standalone business case on its own. So maybe it's something that can fit here or there, or maybe it can be demerged from the group, complete standalone. And so I think it's always good to say, hey, if you've got a great idea, if you want to fly with it, you want to find some structure or you want to get resources to do it. I don't mean this in an aggressive, passive way of saying, show me the business case, but it's like, hey, let's work on a business case. Yeah. Let's work on a business case for this. So let's see if there's an addressable market. Then let's have a look at feasibility in terms of do we have the skills to do it? If we don't, can we buy those skills in? Can we go and acquire a company that's doing that? Because this might become critical because you innovate or die, right? So and just I think one of the terms that came from this Nordic Business Forum is disruption is the norm. Survival depends on turning it into opportunity. So it's like do you want to be a laggard or do you want to be going forward with this? So back to the structure. I'm sorry, it's probably the numbers side of me, but it's a business case, and that doesn't necessarily mean just spending hours over scenario planning and an Excel spreadsheet. But the business case is, I've seen there's some really good signals here. So there might not be a really clear path to say this is definitely what people are looking to buy, but we can see there's trends and signals, and then you're ahead of the curve, not just catching up.
Yeah, it's very good, because there needs to be a reason. And innovation kind of can be categorized in, is it a core innovation, so to the core product, and is it making it simpler, faster, more engaging, all those things, or it can be adjacent. So is this an area that we haven't considered and it's going to be really interesting, or it can actually be some blue sky thinking. And depending on that, you'll decide. But the key point is you need to understand what it is. What is the goal? What is the customer, and the unfair advantage that gives you related to everything that exists. What is the system? If you go through with it, what system are you going to use in order to make it? What is the things that you're going to measure? Because if not, if you don't know what type of innovation you're talking about, if you don't know how is this going to be an unfair advantage, then yeah,
Yeah,
continue on the drawing board, because you probably need to get. And sometimes is, we talk, as you said, about business case, but the business case starts very clearly with, this is this is why this is created, this is how this is going to be affected and make this better world, and this is what it needs to be. If you don't have those, you don't even need to go into the numbers. It's like,
yeah, Yeah.
we need to get those first. So I absolutely agree. There is a triage. It's
Yeah.
a funnel
And
that
I'm
we need to go through.
trying to steer away from the conversation we had before about the future of product management and, traffic light systems, etc. Because sure, you can have those systems, but they sound a bit rigid. They don't have to be rigid as long as people understand you've got an opportunity to green light it quickly or red light it quickly. Yeah. So that's fine. And it's not just about ideation. What the systems will do is allow you to take it beyond an idea, so that it's actually based on, as you said, on a real goal and real objective and a real positive outcome for the customer or for the business's bottom line, etc.
Yeah, it's because then it will help you understand if it's better to spin out, if it's better to acquire, because this is going to be, it's not core today, but you have in your strategy and you suddenly go, actually, acquiring is a great, or is it, and a lot of companies have kind of corporate venture, a venture fund structures where they go and they say, okay, for core innovation and adjacency, we kind of deal with it. For anything which is blue sky, we have our capital VC,
Yeah.
corporate VC fund set
Yeah.
up, and we'll put some investments. When they succeed, we then go, great, how do we integrate? And
Mm.
Microsoft with ChatGPT and a lot of others have been a great example of that because, yeah, should that innovation have come from a big company, or is it best to go and do it outside and then partner with? That's a critical element if you know why you're doing things and what's going to improve. So it's a very good point.
Yeah, you're not necessarily going to start with a war chest and then be asked to go out there and innovate and come up with some new product ideas. Some organizations are set up entirely to do that. Other organizations, you can start with the ideas and the business cases we've talked about, and then you can go and fundraise, and you can get the a grant to experiment with, or a loan to experiment with, or find a partner to quickly, rapidly create prototypes or proof of concepts or whatever it might be. And it might be done with a relatively small amount of resource to begin with. But all of this is really, there isn't that much certainty other than the fact that things will change. Yeah. So, there has to be a little bit of a leap of faith. But as you said, you create sandbox, you create an environment and a culture for people to be curious. Yeah. And not accept the norm. And that's obviously sometimes easier said than done. But if you can create that culture of safety and make people feel courageous and not belittle, not just about things like rapid return on investment, is an interesting one. I mean, we've seen cycles, you and I, right, on the return on investment, in terms of internally, at one point, it was okay to say a return on investment in 3 years, but maybe not today. One of the speakers at Nordic Business Forum, was saying, don't be so focused on a return on investment model. I'm not sure if I quite agree with that, but I think what they're trying to say is that you don't know everything just yet. Yeah. But I think I like to have some metrics, and I like to have some idea of your future readiness still. Yeah. Even if that's just to say, we want you all to continue to learn and continue to challenge things, rather than saying you must go and now train on XYZ.
Yeah, it's, and I get the part where the speaker said, don't be so focused on the return on investment. It shouldn't be your first concern, but it should be there. It might be in a year, 2 years,
Mm,
5 years, doesn't matter. But you need to understand when and how do you get there, because as you mentioned, mentioned very well, which is a leap of faith.
yeah.
And for example, Lean Startups by Eric Ries, it actually talks about leap of faith assumptions. If you're doing a leap of faith, and innovation is about managing the unknown, managing change and all of that, if you do and you say, okay, here's the idea, here's what we'll do, here's why, here's what we believe, and here's the assumptions, the leap of faith assumptions that we're considering. Then measure that. Because then, yes, you might not have. So, based on this leap of faith assumptions, we believe that our return on investment is going to be here. Great. Are you measuring your leap of faith assumptions? If
Mm.
the answer
Yeah.
is no, is way
Mhm.
what's going on? Because
Yeah.
it's about that power dynamics and clarity, transparency throughout. Who owns it? What goes through it? It's not putting, as you mentioned, about the very strict set of processes and systems and everything, but you need to have something. So I think one, and I would love to ask your opinion, but I think one of the reasons why it fails is also because people think that being in innovation is also going and have free reign to do anything. Those
Yeah.
are different things.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your opinion, and what type of governance model should innovation teams really adjust? And what have you seen in order for that to really be effective?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's obviously a good idea to keep in mind the big pictures of the objectives and the goals of the organization. I mean, they if you know if the company is just trying to get a step value, so we're talking about venture building. So if at this point in time it's because they're trying to do an IPO, then been doing new products and stuff might not be the best thing to do. You're probably going to be focused on footprint and market penetration and getting your profitability up, for example, right? And governance and management structure and all of those hygiene factors. If you're not focused on something like an IPO or that type of thing at that point in time, but you are thinking about how you can take yourself from being a, I don't know, 10 million turnover business to a 100 million turnover business, you need to think a bit more radically. You're probably looking at things like coming away from not just being a time-based billing business, for example, a services business, and maybe building your own IP and product and earn while you sleep. So you can say, for example, you can set some like innovation challenges, which is we already have this customer segment that loves us. I think we could sell them, um, in addition to our core products and services. What else are these people interested in? I know you're not then coming a million miles away. Or you might say, we are the best at producing this product or service, and we only seem to be looking after this customer segment. Could we develop some more products for them, or can we adapt our product for some new customer segments? Yeah. And it's all about thinking about what segment you're going to own. And so if you can say we own, if you do a customer segmentation analysis and we can say that, we're really good at looking after this type of customer, but is there more we can do with them? And that can be your ring fence as such. Or if you've got a product that you want to open it up to other segments, don't go to an area where they're completely swamped, but find an served segment that you can adapt your product for. And it's sounding very product management now around this, but it's one of those core things as my route of how I approach things. And this is also part of the structure. So you can make a lot of people within the organization think a bit like a product manager as well. Yeah. But you can also say, some of you guys don't need to worry about the business case, or you don't need to think about whether it fits on the product roadmap against company goals and objectives. I also like the idea of just giving people that blue sky thinking, as you said. Yeah. But for that, the best way to address that on the structure is not making people feel guilty to spend time on that. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that, Friday's innovation day or something. It can be things like these hackathons. So it's away days, away days and workshops and things where you can just take time out and you're not allowed to do anything else, during that time.
And that's an important part, because you mentioned a hackathon, and that's a really strong element. You can have innovation every time, but every now and then doing a hackathon. And
Mm,
one of the things that, from my experience, I've seen is you can do a hackathon with people from within. They
yeah,
are brilliantly impactful if you actually bring your customers. So
yeah,
you were talking about your customer segment. There's one thing in finance where people talk about KYC, and it's like an alien term, but it's know your customer. You're in a business, you need to know your customer. And if you're innovating, you need to know your customer. Who is it? Why are they looking for that? And so on. And on these hackathons, bring the customer, bring some, and I remember doing this in one of my roles in Sage, and we were having some things and doing a hackathon in order to solve a problem, and we got a whole bunch of customers, great customers, some that were friendly,
Hmm.
and we asked also to get some unfriendly ones.
Yeah.
And then presenting and going through and collaborating, we ended up with something that we thought was a problem that would need months and months to solve. It took an afternoon in order to solve
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So your point of knowing your customer is absolute key.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there was, Sage is an interesting business, and we probably shouldn't talk too much about a form employer, but it's one of these things they could have quite easily rested on their laurels and thought everybody's using our desktop product. We don't need to do anything else, right? And it's not just then about going over to being a cloud-based solution, with regular updates and subscriptions and all the rest of it. It's also all of the other services and the integrations and things that go with it. And then this is what I was talking about, that customer and product thing. So that customer, but what else do they want? They might want an ERP, they might want e-invoicing, they might want, to be able to scan their receipts. And you change so much that's happening in the back office, and you're integrating with COMs now and all the rest of it. So it's not the same as a dull piece of accounting software that was only used by the accountant, yeah, or an external accountant. So I just gathered my thoughts again. Sorry, I lost my thought train for a little bit. One of the other things from a structure I think you can look at, you mentioned something about like internal is external. My colleague that I do some mentoring and M&A advisory work with Andrew Bailey. So Andrew and I have been talking about this quite a lot lately as well. And it's amazing how having someone from outside of the organization for people to talk to helps. So whilst we might be doing mentoring with the owner founder of a business through Bailey Partners, they sometimes will bring us in to meet other people within the team. And this isn't training or coaching necessarily, but it is giving people the opportunity to realize that the owner of the business is, or the CEO, etc., is basically giving you the freedom to start going back to challenging things, right? And then when we talk about giving people time to take time out to think differently, etc., as well, it's also making sure that people have got a healthy balance between their day-to-day tasks and time to think strategically, time to look after themselves, yeah, whatever works for them. And then the whole M&A piece is, it's also about, you might go and acquire a company that will give you that leg up into that area that you really feel like you need to get to. There's companies out there that just grow through acquisition, and it's not just about getting more customers and more products. It's actually saying, this is the direction things are going. We're a big monolithic business, for example. It's going to take us a while to be able to do X, Y, Z. So let's go and find a smaller competitor and we'll make them part of our machine, but we're not going to stifle their innovation either, right? It's not just going to, because I've also seen that where it fails, they go and buy the smaller business, they bring it in and they take the wind out of everybody's sails. So it's one of these things that you want to have the structure and governance of a corporation, but you don't want to have the restrictions and the stuffiness of a corporation that takes away people's creativity or voice.
And that's a very important point and leads us to as you mentioned, the talent, the culture and everything,
Yeah.
because there is massive amounts of situations where you do an M&A and then you either don't integrate or you integrate and you forget to decide actually which culture do you need
Yeah.
for different parts of the business, because sometimes there is the what you need to keep and there's the innovation. So they don't need to be the exact same org structure and governance structure, but
Yeah.
you need to understand why it is, and talent and culture is really important. So what type of leadership style have you seen succeeds better inside of venture building teams?
You would use the word incentives today, and we haven't really touched upon that too much. So I think leaders should put a structure in place of incentives, and they can be individual and team incentives. Yeah. Um, they can be fun things, they can be long-term things, they can, they can be financial things, they can be recognition, etc. Right? And I do sometimes people just think of incentives as financial incentives. Yeah. But there's a lot more to it than that. So I think incentives is a part. The other one is whilst you want to create the sandbox, etc., but you want to make it real as well. So that incentive can be thinking that actually, if you turn the fortunes around for the business, there's something in it for you here. And I like large organizations that have a combination of both individual and company incentives for things like bonus. Yeah. But also companies that encourage employee option schemes or skin in the game, I think is also really important. And those are ways of making the staff realize that their voices, their actions have an impact. And if it's a positive impact, they're going to gain. They're going to gain from that. It also teaches responsibility as well, because if you don't make your metrics or whatever it might be, there you go. So if it means that you're not innovating and you're just grandfathering products and hoping that the cash cow will keep you going for a while, use the old BCG matrix. But if you've got people who are saying, yeah, I'll take care of those things in the meantime, but also we're going to be looking for the next rising star and all the rest of it, then that's why we need to have one of the reasons why large companies fail is because people get very complacent and they plod. Yeah. They keep their head down. They don't create waves. I've probably had the opposite problem where I probably have upset a few people along the way because not everybody wants to hear the truth, or perhaps I haven't always said it the nicest way. But I think it's you should be encouraging people to challenge things, to come up with positive contributions that will change things. I think sometimes people are rewarded for keeping their head down. Yeah.
And that's a very good point, because I think that's where we go into boards and executive sponsors and everything. And you
Yes.
mentioned before that we're used to have 3 to 5 years and so on,
Mm.
and now we're going much less. And that short termism, if
Mhm.
that exists in a board or an executive team, that's where people are. It's a culture. People are rewarded for keeping the head down, but
Yeah.
I, just like you, it was a similar. I was not accused, let's say, of putting my head down. Sometimes accused of being
Mm.
a troublemaker, because we need to say things how they are, but also have a solution. And here's what we could do, and be positive. And but we also need, from a culture, top-down culture that includes the board, something that is an open mindset, and also not wanting everything to be in incredibly short term, because if we enter short termism, that's what led Blockbuster to ruin. That's what led other
Mhm.
companies like Kodak to have that Kodak moment, and others. What do you see in those mistakes from boards, executive sponsors? What do you see those mistakes, and how can they really avoid them? What are the key elements that you would say if you were advising them now?
Yeah, and you reminded me that you worked with GE before as well, and they had like their labs and things, and it's like these I've seen these innovation hubs can be, on principle, they sound really good, right? With what we've just been talking about. A lot of them fail, and it'd be interesting to explore why they fail. I think often is because companies can't get this. I think the modern term is hybrid collaboration working. So you've got corporates and you've got startups. But where things have worked quite well is if you look at financial services, for example, in the UK, the Financial Conduct Authority, they did create an environment where you could challenge things and you could much quicker get past the regulations, because the regulations can kill it for a large business. You're not going to go any further because you just think you'll never get it past the regulator. So I think there's some good case studies on financial services from the UK where some of them have failed is because I don't think people want to give up their day job from the corporate, or they don't want to take the risk with that startup. And maybe that startup doesn't quite understand how to work with the corporate, and maybe um, the integration doesn't really go so well. They change the culture too quickly, one way or the other, perhaps. But I think I would really think about how this hybrid collaboration works. So corporates co-building with early stage funds, maybe, rather than necessarily startups, maybe with the early stage funds that can put a portfolio of companies together. And now when we talk about startups, so I was at a scale up startup event I just came back from. Yeah, we've got a few more grey hairs now in these startups and things as well. And a lot of people have come from corporate life and now wanting to work in SME sector and startups, etc. So I hope we can try and find the best of both worlds rather than the worst of both worlds. And what do I mean by that? So you can have the discipline and structure, but you don't have the politics or the egos. Yeah. And maybe the business models can be a bit more disruptive, which is you don't necessarily need such a quick return on investment because you can get external funding rather than your existing portfolio has to fund it, fund it for you.
And you mentioned something very important. I think it's egos. It's not only yeah, there is a lot of egos, and we talk about people's egos and so on. It's not only the people ego, is sometime the company ego. So
Mm,
there is a lot of companies that go and people are there going, we are too big to fail. We will be able to do anything. Having that kind of approach is in a lot of ways you can build whatever innovation centers you want every building.
mm,
Personally, there are certain innovation centers that personally I believe they should be doing the blue sky and so on,
yeah.
because then the product teams should be doing innovation on their core and adjacencies
Mm,
every single day.
hmm.
But if we start looking at this from a perspective that we're too big to fail and the ego of the company, the corporate,
Yeah.
that's where we get in trouble. So
Mm,
moving towards that as a close, what do you think is the future of corporate venturing? You mentioned, for example, instead of investing in the company, why don't partner with an early stage venture fund or something like that? So, what's your predictions on how large companies will progress from that and thinking about foresight and things like that?
yeah, I think large companies are going to try and unlearn a few things. Or mature businesses are going to try and unlearn a few things. I think it feels a bit like when we talk about like large organizations like governments and things like that, we're just hung up on efficiency all the time, right? Rather than maybe being effective. And this means that we are sometimes limiting our mindset in terms of ambition as well, because we're just trying to iterate and squeeze a little bit more out. And sometimes, with the corporate venturing, it's actually looking at more radical ideas and taking a bit more of a risk in terms of this is our version today. What's the version of ourselves that we want to be in the future? And if you're a big corporation, that's quite difficult because you think, no, this is what we are, right? And the ego, we're the best, and blah blah blah. But well, you still might you might still have those same brand values, etc. But you might radically need to be moving your product or services along, or the age group of your customer segment, etc., the composition of your board, the type of departments you have, and how the mindset isn't just an innovation department or R&D or product department, but it's a mindset across departments. Stop thinking about how things happen to you and how you can make things happen because in the bigger companies we're normally thinking about things are happening to us, like there's been COVID or interest rates have gone up or whatever it is. And if you're a startup, if you can adopt that little bit more startup scale up mentality, then you're thinking about how can we make things happen.
And it's as you say, also going and looking at every challenge as an opportunity. A startup typically goes and says, okay, how can I leverage this to even go faster or do something,
Mm.
versus being scared of that change. I think change needs to really be something that we
Yes.
appreciate and love and everything, because if not, if we see that as a threat,
Yeah.
then no structure is going to help. So that
Mm.
culture of, yes, let's be innovative, let's get some risks, we need to understand what the
Mm.
risks are and measure the right KPIs. You mentioned a very interesting, the efficiency.
Mm.
And efficiency is really about how can you do the same exact thing with less resources,
Mhm.
instead of doing how can we do this business process better.
Yep.
That's, the two are not the same. They might be, but are not the same. One means you're constantly reinventing. So this is a process.
Yep.
Is there something else out there that I can do in order to make it better, faster, more transparent, and so on? Versus I'll just do the exact same thing as we've been doing for 20 years, but I'll do it with less resources, which
Yeah.
in some cases I'm even worried, and being a techie, and you too,
Mm.
you go, aren't a lot of companies doing that with AI and agents and everything now? Is it
Mhm.
efficiency or effectiveness, as you
Yeah.
mentioned? So it's a very interesting way, because it can be a culture killer, innovation killer, if you're only focusing on reducing the amount of resources, but you didn't change the process or rethink who
Yeah.
your customers are, what your product is, and how is the best way.
Yeah.
What's the new way in order to do that?
Exactly. So it might have cost you less, you might have done a bit quicker, you might have used less resource, but the outcome's the same for the customer. Wouldn't it be better if we had better outcomes? Like we solved 90% of the problems, it's still only 10% of the problems. And if you look at things like health, preventative health, or I mean, these are things that can impact real lives. This isn't just about, you know, EBITDA. Yeah.
And that's a very good point, because health is, and I'm passionate for health, is a great example, because what we have, independently of what we think, we don't really have a healthcare system. We have a sick care system,
Yeah.
because we have something that is being geared toward, you're sick, here's what we do. And mostly it's about solving the problem or what is happening, which might not be the root cause. And now we're seeing all this about longevity, preventative care, and everything, because that really is about moving it to healthcare systems. So let's make sure that you don't get sick in the first time.
Hmm.
And that's a little bit as innovation for a company is, instead of keeping the efficiency role going on, let's start in the beginning and actually make sure we don't get sick in the first time. And for
Yeah.
that, innovate.
Yes. Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Good.
So fantastic. Rob, this was a fantastic conversation. It was a real masterclass of how to unlock innovation from the inside, and actually going and seeing when to go inside, outside, and so on. So what you shared isn't really theory, and we hear a lot of theories. This was your operational wisdom, because you went through this. And so, to everybody listen, share this with your innovation, strategy, growth teams. Follow Rob Connell on LinkedIn, and watch the next episode on how global sales alignment becomes your ultimate value multiplier. That will be our final episode of this series. I'm sure we'll figure out more, but this was absolutely key. Do you want to be future proof? You need to be constantly innovating, and that's what Rob told us today. Thank you very much, Rob.
Thank you, Nuno. And I hope this inspires people to sort of keep challenging and, let's go for positive disruption out there. Right?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And to everybody, keep going, keep following. And as Rob said, let's do the positive disruption into our businesses because that will help us all. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.